Oh, for about 4 or 5 years now, we've been trying to implement a focused deterrence strategy for reducing violent crime in Central County. Now, focused deterrence is a best practice. It's an evidence-based strategy that has worked in places like New York City, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, places that have focused on a specific type of behavior that is a key part of violent crime and patterns of violent crime. And so we have been able to put some pieces of it together, but finally we've been able to get the resources to develop a comprehensive approach that will get parole, probation, the East St. Louis Police Department, Washington Park Police Department, Illinois State Police, my office, as well as our federal partners, and also other social service providers, all on the same page and focusing, literally focusing on one particular set of conduct, and that is illegal gun possession. Why would we focus on that? Well, we all know that the rate of homicides here in communities like the ones behind me, the rate of guys that are likely to shoot or be shot, the number of people that are dying in illegal gun violence is way disproportionate, way higher than what it should be here for a community this size. But what is at the root cause of that, or what is part of that process, is a lot of young guys who have a gun illegally. We're not talking about lawful gun owners, we're not talking about people with FOID cards, we're not talking about legitimate ownership of firearms. We're talking about young guys that have a gun illegally, and they have it because they're likely to shoot or be shot. And we know that when you put that in the equation, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a gun-related homicide. We know that there are any number of factors that contribute to that decision-making process, where a young guy decides that he'd rather pull the trigger, than walk away. And the dynamic where a young guy who's got a gun illegally, and he's in a situation where there's some conflict, or there's some beef, or there's some type of dispute, and making that choice to not value his own life as well as the person that he's shooting, that's at the heart of this process of so many of the homicides that are occurring here in East St. Louis and the surrounding area. And so when you have limited resources, when you have cuts to law enforcement, when you have cuts to parole, you have cuts to probation, you have to focus your resources on the thing that is having the most impact, and focus your resources on the conduct that can have the most positive impact in terms of your ability to change that conduct and produce different outcomes. So for us, it is all the gun-related homicides. It is not about necessarily the possession of the gun itself. It's the choice to use that gun in a way that results in the loss of life, results in someone being killed, that results in another gun homicide, gun-related homicide, another death in the community, another young man who loses his life, and another young man who probably winds up losing their life to some extent because they're headed off to prison. So that dynamic where you have 2 or more people that have firearms, and they have them illegally, and they are likely to shoot or be shot, helping to impact that decision-making process that occurs there. That is what this effort is about. And now we have funding we have received some funding from the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. My office applied for it, and now we have finally received some funding to institutionalize the focused deterrence program. And that is about a couple different things. It is focusing our efforts in terms of parole compliance on people that are likely to shoot or be shot, and those are illegal gun offenders, people that are on parole that are involved in illegal gun activity. They're likely to be involved in a homicide as a victim or as a perpetrator, focusing efforts on people who are on probation for gun-related offenses, those that are likely to shoot or be shot or be involved in a gun-related homicide, driving up those homicide numbers in this community, and focusing our efforts in terms of when those cases are initially prosecuted, the conditions of probation that we put on them, the conditions of parole, carving out specific requirements for them in terms of how they are supposed to serve their probation and their parole, making sure that we are getting at the underlying issues that make it so easy for a young man to pull the trigger, make it so easy for a young man to not value his own life, or value the life of another because of the factors that are part of that decision-making process. Now, if we've got a guy that's on probation, we've got a guy that's on parole for a gun-related offense, we know they are likely to shoot or be shot. We know that they are the next potential homicide waiting to happen. And if we can intervene with that young man early on, and usually that's what we're talking about, sometimes juveniles, but usually it's in that range between 18 to 25. If we can intervene when we have them in the system and intervene early on and reduce the chances that they're going to pull that trigger, we're going to reduce the chances and reduce the rate of homicides in this community. But we have to focus specifically on that conduct, and we have to focus our very limited resources on that type of conduct. So that means we have to coordinate probation, we have to coordinate parole, we have to coordinate the social services that are there for those probation and parolees to make sure that if they can take advantage of mental health treatment, they can take advantage of drug treatment, they can take advantage of job training that may be available to them to reduce the chances that they will find themselves in that situation where they're going to pull a trigger and be at risk of shooting someone or being shot themselves, and thereby reducing the risk and the chance that someone's going to be a victim in a homicide. So that's what this is all about, is coordination and focusing of these efforts. Focused deterrence is an evidence-based, proven practice that has worked in other places around the country, and we've been for years trying to get the institutional support and the financial support to implement that program here, and now we finally are able to do that. And this initial phase, the $99,000 grant, will pay for a project coordinator and a research partner to help coordinate all those different entities. Part of what we do when we do the focused deterrence is direct messaging to those folks that we think are likely to shoot or be shot. Direct messaging to gun offenders that are in that position where they are likely to pull the trigger or be victimized by a gun homicide. And that direct messaging is not just messaging from law enforcement. It's not just a message about crime and punishment and breaking the law and having a consequence. That's an important part of it. But it's also talking to them like adults, talking to them like human beings, understanding the dynamic that's going on there, and reiterating what they kind of already know in their gut, is that this is a problem that is affecting everybody. We can't attract jobs, we can't make the community safe if we don't address this very important public safety issue. And we make that direct appeal to them, not just by talking about law enforcement, but by hearing from victims in the community, people who have lost loved ones in homicides, people who have suffered because of that in the community. The moral voice of the community directly communicated to those offenders that are likely to shoot or be shot, and it has an impact on them. It does have an impact on their decision-making process. To acknowledge what's going on in the community and to acknowledge the impact that they're having, and to try to give them information that will help them make a different decision when they are in the community, when they are in circumstances where this type of criminal activity occurs. Help them to walk away from it, help them to make a different decision, give them another option besides simply giving up and pulling the trigger and taking another life and winding up back in prison. So it's a deterrence message in terms of law enforcement and enforcing the consequences, but it's also a direct appeal to the defendant and the offenders that are likely to be involved in these. And it's also a way for us to remind them of the resources that are available to them. Connect them with social service providers, connect them with the mental health providers. Some of these guys have undergone significant trauma growing up in a community where they're surrounded by violence perpetually, 24/7. They've seen their friends lose their life, and sometimes they are carrying a gun out of straight up fear. But they do so illegally, and when they do that, they are increasing the chances that they are likely to be a victim of a homicide or to perpetrate a homicide. And that's what focused deterrence is all about. That's what this grant that we've been working for many years is about. It's the initial planning phase to bring all these entities together to focus on this one problem. And I think it's something that could be fruitful for us.